Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. I am really thrilled to welcome you all here this evening for our annual community reading of the medium abridged version of Frederick Douglass's 1852 speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Our main focus for this event is to center Frederick Douglass's words, so we ask everyone to remain muted until the end of the reading, unless, of course, you are one of our readers and it's your turn to speak. I'd like to start by thanking the people and organizations who co-created this event. Special thanks to Joyce Trotman Jordan, Denise Leslie, Barbara Fleif, Paula Alexson, Francis Prestiani, and Pam Wakefield. One of the things that makes this event so special is the number of people and organizations who take part. Our organizing partners who helped co-create the event, of course, are the library, Nassau Presbyterian and Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church Joint Mission Committee, Not in Our Town Princeton, Paul Robeson House of Princeton, McCarter Theater, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton. And we have a really amazing list of supporting community partners: the African American Cultural Collaborative of Mercer County, Arts Council of Princeton, Baha'is of Princeton, Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, Bending the Moral Arc, CASA for Children of Mercer and Burlington, Coalition for Peace Action, First Baptist Church of Princeton, Historical Society of Princeton, I Am Trenton Community Foundation, the Jewish Center of Princeton, Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, Make Us Visible New Jersey, the Mass Incarceration Task Force, Mercer County Community College, Morning Star Church of God in Christ, Mount Pisgah AME Church, Municipality of Princeton, Muslim Center of Greater Princeton, Paul Robeson Charter School, Princeton Civil Rights Commission, PDS Black Alumni, Princeton Charter School, Princeton Middle School, Princeton Public Schools, Princeton Senior Resource Center, the Princeton Union Baptist Church of Trenton, the NAACP Act So, United Methodist Church, Princeton University Office of Community and Regional Affairs, Trenton Literacy Movement, Trenton Spoken Word, the Ojima Village Christian Church, United Mercer Interfaith Organization, Westminster Presbyterian Church, Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, Women Cradle of Abundance, Workwell Partnership, YWCA of Princeton, and the YMCA of Princeton. Many thanks to all of you for all of your support and collaboration, and many thanks, of course, to the people who have volunteered to read this evening, particularly our convening speaker, Dr. Ruha Benjamin. Ruha Benjamin is a sociologist and a professor in the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. The primary focus of her work is the relationship between innovation and equity, particularly focusing on the intersection of race, justice, and technology. Benjamin is the author of numerous publications, including the books People's Science, Bodies and Rights on the Stem Cell Frontier, Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code, and Viral Justice, How We Grow the World We Want. Benjamin is also a prominent public intellectual, having spoken in audiences across the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And today we are both pleased and honored that she is here with us. I know you all join me in welcoming Dr. Benjamin.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is my favorite group of people here in the Zoom room. I love it when the list of co-sponsors is about as long as the program itself. So you know it's going to be good when we can all come together and be stronger together. I am going to speak for about 5 minutes and then kick off the community reading. What I thought I would do is actually connect our 4th of July holiday with Juneteenth and make some connections before we jump into Douglass's speech. Also referred to as Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, National Independence Day. Juneteenth commemorates the emancipation of enslaved people in the United States. It was first celebrated on June 19th, 1865, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. It was the day when General Gordon Granger first sailed into Galveston, Texas, accompanied by roughly 2,000 Union troops to relay General Order Number 3. Now, fast forward to June 17th, 2021. Roughly a year after George Floyd's killing by Officer Derek Chauvin, which, as we know, sparked months of demonstrations, swelling into one of the largest social justice movements in American history and eliciting an unprecedented collective outpouring of racial grief. Juneteenth then became an official US holiday. It was the first new federal holiday since MLK Day was enshrined in 1883, drawing the country one step closer to publicly acknowledging its original sin of slavery. General Granger's order declared that formerly enslaved were free based on absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property. This is the happy news upon which most Juneteenth celebrations were based. It's also an oversimplified tale of what happened that day. As my colleague, Professor Peniel Joseph at UT Austin explains, the real history of Juneteenth remains largely unknown. When Granger announced all slaves are free, it served as a declaration of independence for some and a provocation for others. Indeed, the news was met with a violent, fearful, and vengeful white population. And the backlash of many against the idea of Black citizenship and dignity would become a normal feature of the political landscape, a legacy that persists today. What's more, Granger's order actually limited and undermined the very freedoms that it promised. Quote, the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages, read the order, which is why many Black folks responded to the news of freedom cautiously, fearing reprisals. Yet, as word spread, some did walk away from plantations. Others rejoiced, exulted, and stayed put while planning their next moves. So while we gather to acknowledge the day's importance, we have to also wrestle with its contradictions, knowing that real freedom had not, in fact, been achieved that day in Galveston, and that it is still a work in progress. As Joseph explains, a nation, state, and community can be two things at once, both abolitionist and pro-slavery, integrationist and Jim Crow. All of us, no matter our politics, tend to reduce and oversimplify the historical record. Reality is messier and more nuanced. One of Juneteenth's most important lessons is that history is about not just the country's triumphs, but more often the relentless struggle necessary to achieve a more perfect union. A struggle which all of us gathered together here, no matter our backgrounds, have the honor of being a part of if we choose. And for all of us, alongside the deep-seated racism and inequity that has shaped our nation, there is a parallel anti-racist history, individuals, groups, movements that have worked for justice. For non-Black folks especially, I think it's important to understand that this is not charity work you do to help others, but that, like Margaret Leonard and Paul Green pictured here, you champion justice because you come to appreciate that your own well-being is bound up with others. This grows out of a spiritual awareness of our shared humanity. And here I'm particularly inspired by a vision of justice described in the Baha'i sacred scriptures, which reminds me that we're not only trying to change the world out there, but also the worlds in here. The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behooveth thee to be. Verily, justice is my gift to thee, and a sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes. For me, this passage explains why our nation seems to be mired in the same entrenched problems, because we've tried to change laws and policies without also transforming hearts and minds. We can't expect the world to change if we all stay the same. So with those reflections, join me now for a community reading of Frederick Douglass's famous speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. The papers and placards say that I'm to deliver a 4th of July oration. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude. Mr. Colbert, you're muted.
This for the
You should be good.
This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of the great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career and lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is a hope in the thought, and a hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government. England is the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed in the exercise of its parental prerogatives upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper.
But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victim of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we at this distance of time regard it. The timid and prudent of that day were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
On the 2nd of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshipers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost.
Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes. And for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you the honor of their memory.
They loved their country better than their own private interests, and it will concede that it is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests.
They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to others.
My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us.
The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours.
No, I'm fine.
Not mine.
Oh, you're a camel.
You may rejoice.
Okay.
I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world.
My subject, the fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on the 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future.
Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just.
I fancy I hear some of my audience say it is just this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light?
Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment that the laws of their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a Black man, subject to the punishment is death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the likeness of punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being?
Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write, when you can point to any such laws in reference to the beast of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then will I argue with you that the slave is a man.
Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprise common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle in the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life in immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men.
Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding.
There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
What? What am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to other fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system that's marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in this thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgiving, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages.
There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without rival.
Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now, as the price of men was never higher, and which is carried on in all the large towns and cities in 1/2 of this Confederacy. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called, quote, the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated.
The foreign slave trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers, armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on their frightened captives. There, see the old man with locks thin and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl 13, weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulders tells her to move on.
Follow this drove to New Orleans, attend the auction, see men examined like horses, see the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States.
And I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, They are usually driven in the darkness of night, in the deep, still darkness of midnight. I have been aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chain gangs that pass our door.
Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight.
But a still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented by an act of the American Congress not yet 2 years old. Slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dix's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your Secretary of State enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God, that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread. But of this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage, and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included.
For Black men, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains is sufficient under this hell-black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary Black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side. That's the side of the oppressor.
Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe, and are bound in deciding in the case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers.
In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of your nation solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurt your anathemas at the crown-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina.
You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad, honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation, a system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty.
You shed tears over falling Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators. Your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you will enforce the strictest silence and will hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America.
You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bear your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off the 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the Black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and had commanded all men everywhere to love one another, yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own.
You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your father rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of inhabitants of your country.
Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth.
It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride, it breeds insolence, it promotes vice, it shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
But it is answered in reply to all this that precisely what I have denounced is in fact guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States. That the right to hold and hunt slaves is part of that Constitution, framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before you, your fathers, instead of honest men, I have declared them to be, were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is inevitable conclusion, and from it, there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the frames of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe. And others have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference.
The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it, all God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend, each foe.
Thank you.
Paula, will you bring us together?
Certainly. Thank you so much, everyone, for your reading tonight. I want to open up this space for anyone that wants to reflect on the resonance of the message tonight or the experience of having heard the reading. Oops, I'm going to mute you, Barbara, until you're ready to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Benjamin. We have in the chat. I loved hearing all of the different voices reading this evening. Thank you to Ruha Benjamin and all the readers. This was truly a remarkable experience. Please feel free to unmute yourselves if you'd like.
Thank you. My name is Ashton, and I'm watching from Los Angeles, California.
Wow.
This is the first that I've heard of your event, and I am just so gratified to have been able to share and listen to all of the speakers. The diversity is just, it warms my heart. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Clark, and thank you for your words.
Lots of people are writing in the chat. Thank you to Ruha Benjamin and all the readers. Incredibly powerful. Thank you all, beloved community. Thanks, Ruha. I can't read. The comments are coming through so fast.
They are. Michelle Peel said, I love Dr. Ruha's opening. Douglas's words ring true today. America still has a lot of work to do to honor its true promise.
This was truly amazing. Being fairly new to the Princeton community, when Kim asked me to read, I didn't know what to expect. And then I got on here and I saw some friends from that I haven't seen in some time. Listening to the beautiful voices, the diversity, this was truly an amazing experience, and my child got to experience it too. And that's very important to me, and that's why I'm in Princeton in the first place. I came there for youth development, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, because I would not have known about it. But what an amazing experience. So thank you, and hopefully you'll let me come back next year.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
I was going to say, one of the things that I enjoyed the most is how many young people were readers this year. So to all the young adults, you are carrying the torch together with us, and together we can do what we're called to do. Justice for all.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like
Yes,
to say
Reverend
that
Karen took the words out of my mouth. But I do want to say that I read this every year and sometimes twice a year. And each time it is a forceful push forward to keep at what we are attempting to do.
Thank you, Dr. Hodges. Todd?
I'd like to say, in just this year alone, I kept reading this speech over and over again in different parts. And I truly believe that he was one of the bravest and most courageous Americans of our time, of our country's existence.
Just want to say, I put it in the comments. I'm a Canadian, but I've lived stateside for over 20 years, and the rulings by the Supreme Court last week brought me to tears to see the country moving backwards, this country that I've adopted, and especially the decision on Friday that set progress backwards. And when in the speech tonight they said, let this damning fact be perpetually told, let it be thundered around the world, etc., that the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe. I don't know how much more true that statement could be than it has been this, to end Pride Month with those rulings and to have those judges be there under a bribe, what's there. It just says, how little we've changed, how far we've come despite that. So thank you for this, and thank you for helping restore my faith in this country that I call home.
Thanks, Janie. Angie and Tim, you have your hands up?
Yes. Angie, you can go ahead.
My name is Angel, and I'm the founder
I'm sorry, Angel.
of Black Women in Artificial Intelligence. And I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for this great presentation. And although I know we are just, I guess, one day or what have you beyond the 4th of July, to hear this beyond February, which is usually where we couple these types of events, is absolutely phenomenal. And to have such diversity in the room, and I'm hoping that those who had never read it, if this was their first time, they're willing to read it again. And I'm hoping that we all glean something different for those of us who've heard it before. So thank you guys so much for putting on an excellent presentation and providing an opportunity to have a in-depth conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you as well. It's kind of different seeing elders, you know, people that you respect, people that you've never met before, people have the same interest in it, and it broadens the scope. My name is Tim Robeson. I'm part of the African American Culture Collaborative of Mercer County. I also am I won't call myself a teacher, but I do work at Village Charter School as African American Studies teacher there. And I'm coming to find that our children know nothing about what is going on. I am 53. My youngest is 25. Most of the children have not even seen Drumline, let alone understand what Frederick Douglass, Malcolm X. They hear about Malcolm X, about Martin Luther King and other things, but I don't think they hear enough about the history of us. They consider it boring. They consider it not interesting nowadays, but they don't understand the method and the reasoning behind this understand of what's going on. But I think it just needs to be a lot more push. I understand about the Amistad curriculum and all these other things, but there needs to be some things going on at home where our children need to learn this from, and I don't think it's enough. Most children don't even know anything about what was passed. Most adults they don't even know what just passed either. They just know July 4th just passed. They know Juneteenth just passed, but they don't know anything else about what is going on or what has happened these past few weeks. So once again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to reading again. And it was nice meeting you and seeing you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might just, before we move on to Miss Avery Diane Williams, I just wanted to read out something from the chat. We were supposed to be joined by Dr. Nava Sharif of the Muslim Center of Princeton, and she was delayed in joining us, but is with us now. We're so grateful to have you in community with us, Dr. Sharif, and we'll make sure that you are absolutely included last year. So thank you for joining us. Ms. Williams, and then we'll go to Isa Blyden and Mr. Liverman, and then Miss Linda and Miss Denise.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Avery Danae Williams, and I'm a rising sophomore in Princeton University's Department of African American Studies. I mentioned it in the chat, but thank you so much to Dr. Ruha Benjamin for your wonderful opening words and really setting the tone for tonight. I am staying on campus this summer for an internship, and this is my first time participating, and just hearing the amount of emotion evoked from not just people who look like me, African Americans, but also from all walks of life. And I look forward to participating in future ones, and whether it be in person or virtually, even with the unfortunate news of, affirmative action and everything that was going on, particularly in Florida with the AP African American Studies curriculum and a bunch of other things, just coming together and being able to reflect on that and almost and like go back in time as well, and seeing how that there's still so much more progress that we need to do.
So glad to have you in community, and thank you for that, Ms. Williams. Go ahead, Isa.
Oh, good evening. This is the first time I've ever listened to this, and my first question was, he must not. It was not at the beginning. It was not during the revolution. You know, my history has me as a descendant in part from a country where, when the American Revolution took place, there was an emancipation of the slaves that fought on the side of the English. In 1024, returned to Sierra Leone, which made it the first country that was going to be receiving free emancipated slaves who settled there. They were going to build a nation. It was going to be based on commerce, Christianity, and love. And they did. They also settled in Nova Scotia and in Jamaica. They went to different places. There are churches that they built in New York State. They had quite an interesting life, very civilized. And there's a celebration of their having been emancipated after the revolution. There's a film called The Book of Negroes that tells you about this emancipated group of slaves who, for siding with the English, and those who even did not necessarily side with the English, but ran and joined them just so they could escape and be free, is an extremely important part of the history of America, particularly since Lafayette, who helped fund the rest of the war, did it on the belief that George Washington was going to free the slaves in America. And when he didn't, he wrote him a letter and said, if I had known that you were not going to free your slaves, I would have never helped you. Now, these all happened when the 4th of July took place, when this whole thing took place. You did have an emancipation of Africans who did leave the country. They did not become Americans. They went home. They were free. It was their fight for freedom. That's what they got out of it. The British were defeated. The English were defeated. But school, when you're talking about educating the students and not putting it properly in the curriculum, the complete history of the American War of Independence and the whole history of slavery in America, beginning with the struggles and all, need to be properly taught or included in the curriculum in such a way that the children can have a balanced view, that they can understand Frederick Douglass on the one hand, and also look at the historic documents that have to do with the struggle to get America to emancipate and free and end slavery when the Independence War was won. It is an extremely critical moment in American history that is omitted. And I think it's wrong that it is omitted because it's there and it's documented. But I really appreciated the narration. I'd never heard it before.
And we're so grateful for you for restoring those facts to us. Thank you so much. Mr. Liberman, and then Miss Linda.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. I mean, it was a great speech, and I want to thank everyone for participating. I know Denise and Kim and everyone else is like throwing eggs at me because I was supposed to be a speaker, but I just didn't have the time at this point. But I wanted to say, and it's so important, is that I think Avery from University may have mentioned this in a way, but history is repeating itself. Our rights are diminishing as we live every day. And I think it's something that we need to look out for. Douglas's speech was before its time. I've often said that. This speech can be taken to 2025, 2037, 2045, 2050, and we go back to the same thing. So I want us to all be mindful that the words that were said tonight, because they are so important for us to keep our freedom and to keep women and folks of color and everyone else, basically free. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you to everyone. Believe me, my heart is out for everyone that participated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liverman.
Thank you to everyone who
organizers, participants, and attendees. It's always a very powerful moment to participate and to hear the speech read aloud. It's in the hearing, I think, that makes it even more powerful than in the reading. And just to follow up on what Lance Liverman said and Janie Herman, it's interesting. Every year I catch something different, and I noted this year how Frederick Douglass begins and ends with hope. And in thinking about the relevance today and the discouragement and what we're feeling about the state of the country, I'm thinking of another speaker that the public library brought to Princeton in 2014 when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer and the registration of voters in Mississippi, thanks to the public library. The great Robert Moses came to Princeton and spoke. And when someone asked him, remember this is 2014, asked him about progress, he said, this country lurches forward and then falls back, and lurches forward and then falls back. So if we can think about hope in that context, I think we have a lot to thank Frederick Douglass for, and the great civil rights leaders that followed him.
Wow. Thanks, Linda. Denise.
I'd just like to say how much I thoroughly enjoyed being on the planning committee for this event. I love seeing everybody. And when we call and ask people, would you like to have your organization be involved? Do you have a speaker? We get this enthusiastic, yes, yes. And I want to put out a little hopeful voice. Yesterday, Paul Robeson House of Princeton was invited by Morven Museum and Garden. And think about what the historical place of Morven and Richard Stockton and Betsy Stockton. And we would ask people when they came over to the Paul Robeson table, do you know anything about Paul Robeson? This youngster in Princeton Elementary School, I have his name because his mother put the name down. It was Shiva's mom, Nancy Shaw. So she was Shiva Shah. He told my head a mess about Paul Robeson because the master gardeners have the Robeson tomatoes, and he knew Robeson was an activist, and he had the whole story. So if our Princeton Elementary School, K-12, thanks to Dr. Joy, if they're sitting there and they're going to have this wonderful harvest in September, it gave me a lot of hope. And I was sort of just laughing out loud to see how little things that are done do take root. And this is the third year. Hopefully there'll be a fourth year of this reading of this wonderful speech. And it's really gotten to have a life of its own. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Denise. Councilman Newland, please.
Hi, good evening, all. Thanks all who participated in this. I just want to speak to everyone on behalf of our Mayor, Mark Frieda, who's on the call, myself and other members of council. We certainly understand the challenges and the struggles that exist today throughout America, particularly for people of color. But I want to leave you with this last thought. As for us here in Princeton, our goal, our mission, and our surely goal and everything in our bones and in our hearts and in our desires is here to make Princeton more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable. And we invite all of you to come and participate in our building of community and help us do what we must to make Princeton more representative of what we're trying to do with regard to diversity, and to fight back all of the negativity that exists here in the United States today. There is hope, and we must stay in the struggle and always be ready to defend our democracy and everything that we fought for in the struggle for freedom. God bless you all.
Thank you for that. That feels like an end.
Yes. Thank you.
Go forth with hope and in action.
Everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for coming. See you again next year.
Thanks to Kim and Paula for organizing everything.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Thank you.
Welcome
so
to
much.
Thank you.
Shirley, thank you.
It's great
Thank
being
you,
together.
everyone. Good
Welcome.
night.
Thank you, Kim.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Kim.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay, good night,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Go see the exhibit at the library.